Imagine living with pain every single minute of every day, 24/7. You can't tell anyone that. But then imagine that somebody is slapping a collar on you, making you go on a walk every day. And if you try to do anything but what they want you to do, they give you a lead correction. Maybe they make you go to a doggy daycare where you're there all day and you have to fend off people running at you and jumping on you all day for hours. And then you go home. And if you're a bit dysregulated because you've been fending off dogs all day, you might snap. So then they put a prong collar on you, or they zap you with a shock collar, or they stick you in a crate and bang on it if you whimper. This is the kind of existence that lots of these dogs live with. And it goes on every day. And then they end up living in a state of learned helplessness where they know that nothing is going to stop this.
If you've ever stood in your kitchen at 8:30 on a Tuesday night with a dog who's barking at literally nothing, lunging at things, scared of the postman, scared of the front door, scared of you, scared of their own shadow, and you've thought to yourself, what on earth am I doing wrong? I think you're going to love this week's guest. My guest this week is Kerry Sheldrick, and she's the UK's 2025 Dog Trainer of the Year. Kerry runs Howl School for Dogs, and most of her clients come to her after another trainer has already made things worse. Some of them with shock collars, some of them with prong collars, and some of them with advice that turned a frightened dog into an even more frightened dog. But what Kerry will tell you is that 80% of the behaviour that we see in dogs isn't actually behaviour at all. It's pain that nobody has spotted yet. And then, in her own beautiful words, she'll tell you that you can't punish away pain and you can't punish away fear. This is Just a Dog Podcast, and I'm your host, Nadine. Let's begin. Kerry, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Been looking forward to coming on.
Tell me about Norma.
Norma is my little doggy who, for those that are watching, will be able to see. She's just here. But for those that are listening, she is, imagine if an angel bred with a much hairier angel. That would be Norma. And she is a 11-year-old Yorkie crossed with a Maltese that I got from Battersea Dogs Home when she was 5. She hadn't been out for any walks or anything. She'd lived in a home with another dog and a human. Yeah, they just hadn't left the house. I think there'd been some domestic violence and then the man had left, and so it was just the two dogs. And they were all very stressed by the sounds of it. Lots of fighting between the dogs. And then eventually the woman decided that this wasn't fair. She was going to have to separate them. So Norma ended up at Battersea, and then I knew someone that worked there. And she was there for a week, and then she was with me, and that's it. That's our story, and she's amazing. Hey, do you want this? Come.
My God.
For a little reward. Always. And she's a dustbin. This is what's so interesting about Norma is on her form from Battersea that the previous Guardian had put down, they'd said she's not very food motivated. I have never met a greedier dog in my life. And I've not met a dog that will eat anything. She'll get excited about broccoli, green beans, whatever you give her. She loves it. And I think that that's just testament to how stressed she was in her previous home and how dogs can display certain behaviours, which, it seems like that's their character, but actually it's a response to a stressful environment, because her description of her is not the Norma that I know. The Norma that I know is bold, confident, and a pig. And I mean that as a compliment because I really like pigs.
Actually, I read that somewhere, that part of their brain shuts down when they're in fight or flight or feeling unsafe. They're not very motivated to eat anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as us. If we had a big monster chasing us down the street, probably the last thing we're going to think of is, I quite fancy a sandwich right now.
I quite fancy a pizza. Yeah, exactly.
Also, I think that the food that they were having perhaps wasn't great. Maybe was giving her a bit of tummy ache as well. And so if you do have a dog that has, tummy ache, if they experience food that is giving them tummy ache, they can then go off that food because, that food makes me feel bad. And then combine that with Norma's very good at reading other dogs, and she's very good at avoiding conflict. She doesn't like conflict unless someone gets right in her face, and then she will swiftly tell them where to go. But if she can avoid conflict, she will. So I think if there was a resource guarding going on at home between the two dogs, she very much would have been like, you know what, I'll just leave that. Yeah. And so then when she came to live with me, she was like, oh, for me? No one's going to fight with me for it. I mean, also, she never used to, even when I had food, she wouldn't even look in my direction. she wouldn't come anywhere near me. And I think there had been, some real punishment there regarding food with her. Now she comes and sits next to me because she knows she always gets a little taste of it if it's something that is, dog safe and not going to rot her insides. I try not to eat food that rots from the inside anyway, but you know what I mean. So yeah, she's just a different dog to the one on paper, which is really good. And that's what I think bothers me when dogs do pain trials. And for anyone that's listening doesn't understand what a pain trial is, when a dog has certain behaviors, aggression, reactivity, resource guarding, and they have a pain trial, which is where they're given pain medication for a few weeks and you see if there is a change in some of the behaviors. And if there are, it indicates that the behaviors were pain related, as so many behaviors are. But often the dog will show no difference and they'll just say, well, then there's not pain. But it might not be the right pain medication. It might not be targeting the right part of the dog's physiology, or it might be that it's not strong enough. It might be the equivalent of giving, I don't know, a woman in labor a paracetamol. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
It's so much, and I'm not a vet, I should, and I'm not a veterinary behaviorist either. It's not my job to tell people what medications to take. However, I do have a good understanding of it, and I, work collaboratively with other professionals in that way. And I know that sometimes it needs to be a multimodal approach to pain management. Oh, I had a really frustrating thing happen the other day with a lovely client. The dog's very sensitive to touch. I could see some issues in the gait of the dog. And I said, I think let's speak to your vet and see if they'll agree to you doing a pain trial with your dog if they think there's an issue. And the vet said, well, we couldn't get close enough to the dog to touch them, so we can't do a pain trial because we don't know if there's pain. If you can't get close enough to them to touch them, suggests likelihood is that there is pain. So then do the pain trial because that's the best diagnostic tool you can have, until you get to kind of imaging and things like that. And I also said, or if not, could you refer to physiotherapy so that somebody could work with the dog and try to kind of identify if there's weakness or what's going on? And they said, well, if we don't know what's wrong with the dog, how can we send them to physio? So again, it's a diagnostic tool to find out what's going on, but it's so frustrating.
So frustrating. Was this a conversation with a vet?
It was a conversation with a lovely client, and my advice to that lovely client was to get a second opinion because there are so many great vets out there, but there are one or two that I think still are in the kind of dark ages a bit, perhaps. But there, there's plenty of good ones out there.
Right, Kerry. So let's go way back.
Hey.
To where it all began. Tell me about Kerry as a young person, young child perhaps. Did you grow up with dogs?
So I grew up in a house where having animals around was just totally normal. In fact, it was alien to go to someone else's house and find that there weren't animals. We had a German Shepherd called Casper. He was the first dog that I ever knew. And we had cats and all kinds of other animals along the way. But specifically talking about dogs, we had Casper, the German Shepherd. He was lovely. It makes me really sad, though, when I look back at kind of photos of us as kids sitting on his back, riding around on him. He must have been the most patient German Shepherd in the world. And I'm amazed that none of us ever got bitten. But it was the 80s, though, wasn't it? So, dogs were property then, weren't they? And I know some people still think that's the case, but hopefully the enlightened listeners of this podcast don't share that view. Riding around on him, on his back, lounging on him, laying on him, treating him like he was a cushion and stuff, he was really loved, but we were just wildly inappropriate with him and don't remember him ever having, enrichment wasn't anything that was ever talked about. We had a choke chain for him. I remember that. And I remember as well, when we used to go out, he would really scratch at the door to the point that when we got home, the paint would all be missing from the door. Now, looking back, we know he had separation anxiety. However, back then, the way that it was treated was putting long socks on him so that he couldn't scratch the door. So it was just masking the issue, but not looking at the cause. So yeah, masking the symptom rather.
Yeah.
So we had Casper, and then we had Rosie, the Westie. She was brilliant. They were all brilliant. Yeah. So those were the dogs we had growing up.
Okay.
I always loved them, and I was quite often one that would take them out on walks and things like that.
Was Norma your first dog?
As an adult, yep, she is my first dog.
So you got her, and how was that experience different, as in having your own dog versus having a dog as a child?
Obviously, I was already working in the role that I do now as a dog trainer. So I knew loads more. However, when I first brought her home, the first week that I had her, I cried non-stop, absolute non-stop. I just suddenly felt intense regret, almost like buyer's remorse. What have I done? I've got this dog that won't stop looking at me, because that's what she was doing. She'd just sitting gazing at me like, you are my everything, you're my world. And I just felt immense pressure. And I remember speaking to friends on the phone saying, oh God, I won't even be able to come see you anymore now because I've got a dog and I won't be able to do this. And I basically, my ADHD emotional irregulation was completely, fired up. And yeah. And then I ended up in hospital, not related to that. And I was in there for about 4 or 5 days, and I missed her so much. And that was the point that I knew, my God, I adore this dog. And it had quite taken me by surprise. I missed her so much. And I was getting these videos of her, and I was like, I miss her. And so then the moment I got out, I was like, that was it. Me and Norma, love of my life. So yeah.
Yeah. Is that, tell me if I'm overstepping at all, but as far as I'm aware, you're open about your neurodivergence. And
Mm.
so I'm curious how that translates into you as a dog guardian, but also as a dog trainer.
So yeah, so I have ADHD, late diagnosed. I was diagnosed 12 years ago. Um, Having had anxiety, problems with depression all my life, basically. And, always being told, oh, you're just depressed, you're just anxious, blah, blah, blah. The way it manifests is I'm an absolute sponge for everything that is happening around me. I'm so unbelievably sensitive, so sensitive. If I see something that on the street, someone just saying something unkind to their dog, or treating someone else, it just stays in my mind. I have to have loads of things muted on social media, loads of particular words muted, because if I see them, I just can't get them out of my head. But also, I think a big part of ADHD is injustice sensitivity, and feeling the need to right every wrong that you see. And that can be really exhausting, because I will want to fix every situation that I see. And obviously I can't, but I will then feel terrible about that. So the way that, as a dog trainer, that I deal with that is, if I see things, or if people say things to me when I'm out and about, and I think, oh, that's really dangerous misinformation, or that's just plain wrong. They might say something to me like, oh, some breeds need a firm hand, or they might say, some dogs really thrive on punishment, or, some dogs need a prong collar, or anything like that, or you've got to be an alpha with your dog, or anything. Obviously, I'm not going to stand there and debate with that one person, but I will think, right, rather than getting into an argument or even a debate with this one person, I'll go home and I'll make a reel or a post on social media and counter it that way. And for me, that feels like, oh, I can take some action. I've dealt with that. So at least 5 people that didn't know that before now know that. I can feel better about it. So that's one way I deal with that. In terms of sensitivity, emotional sensitivity, it's really hard. It's really hard. View behaviour through the lens in a trauma-informed way. I also, I really dislike anthropomorphism of dogs, in that people will ascribe certain personalities to dogs, such as they're stubborn, or they're aggressive. Or I don't know if you saw something I shared the other day, where someone told me their dog likes to trick people by sometimes being friendly and sometimes being aggressive. And I said, oh, that kind of unpredictable behavior can sometimes be linked to pain or discomfort. And she said, no, he just enjoys tricking people. I was like, that's not something that a dog would do. There's no
Incentive.
no, there's no evolutionary reason why a dog would ever learn to trick somebody. They don't need to do that. That's a very human quality. I try to model with my dog as best as I can when I'm out and about. If I see somebody, kind of, if their dog's not doing what they want them to do, and they're kind of going, no, which I hate that, because the dog doesn't understand what that finger in their face means, or what the word no means. And it also doesn't take into account what's causing that behavior. It's probably over arousal. They're probably in an environment that's stressing them out. So I try to very loudly with Norma, when I'm going past them, model what I'm doing with Norma and showing that there's another way, using a reward-based approach.
Mhm.
Letting her stop and sniff, taking that time, letting her stand for 10 minutes if she wants to sniff around a bin or something like that. If we're not in a rush to get somewhere, it's no biggie. Not pulling her around, keeping that lead nice and loose, and just giving her the time and space to process her environment. Because, so often people just assume that this world makes total sense to dogs, and how could it? I mean,
Yeah.
there's going on in the world that we don't understand, and we have the ability to kind of understand, in the basic sense, something such as, computers. We know what they are. We might not understand the workings of them. But to dogs, the fact that I'm sitting here talking to an inanimate object right now, it can be very worrying for some of them. But people often don't take that into account, that we do a lot of weird shit. Really believe in rewarding the behaviors you want to see. The behaviors you don't want to see, you need to understand why they're happening and think about
Mhm.
what is going on in the dog's world in that moment that is making
Yeah.
that happen. Is it that they are overwhelmed, they are stressed? Is it that they are confused? Is it that you have somehow accidentally reinforced this? Is it that the environment is not the right place for them? Is it that this is a natural dog behavior and you're not allowing it? Or is it that it's a natural dog behavior that has become maladaptive, such as a guarding breed, such as a German Shepherd, excessively guarding? That would be a maladaptive behavior. It's gone wrong. Why has that happened? Is this dog in pain? Has this dog got hip dysplasia? It's, that sort of thing. It's trying to understand them rather than just shut the behavior down. And
Mhm.
there's no difference between the way that I would approach dogs as I would approach a kid exhibiting challenging behavior either.
Going back to your education, you studied to become a teacher and you were deputy head teacher. And then I read that you were just kind of disillusioned or disappointed with the system. Tell me about that, and then also the crossover from teaching to becoming a trainer. I think during COVID, if I read that correctly.
So, yeah, I worked as a teacher for 10 years and I loved it. And I was a very good teacher. And I used to train other teachers how to teach. I was also the special educational needs coordinator at the time before becoming the deputy head teacher. And I loved it. But what I stopped loving was the pressure from local authorities, the pressure from Ofsted, obviously, the government's kind of inspectors, and the endless focus on data, as in their grades. I accept the need to analyze data, but I think that data needs to be of a holistic nature. Some of the kids were coming to school and they had families that had a lot of trauma, and the kids had a lot of trauma. And I always thought it was amazing if they could come to school and they could be functioning, if they were able to sit in a classroom, let alone trying to get people to have to move them along certain levels in different subjects, which of course we wanted to do. I wanted to give them an education, but I think for a lot of them, we needed to be able to meet their emotional needs first, because a lot of them were they were bouncing off the walls, a lot of them. Yeah, I got disillusioned with that. I really wanted to work in an environment where we could help these kids to have resilience and to all of these, areas that are going to actually genuinely help them to grow up to be really well-adjusted humans, happy humans. And so, yeah, I think I was just completely exhausted and worn out, and I needed a break from teaching, because it's that same thing that I was saying earlier. When I do something, I want to do it really well, and if I see something going on, I want to challenge that. I want to, in a school of, I don't know, 600 kids or whatever, that's a lot. So yeah, I needed a break, so I quit that, and I got a job in a pub for a bit, which was great. And then I started working for an art organization. Was doing that for a few years, which was great. But in the background, studying to work with dogs because I thought I still want to be doing something where I am sharing education, where I'm making a difference. I do love dogs.
Why did you choose dog training? Like, it's just because you love dogs. What was the thought process there?
Because of doing the Borrow My Doggy, which was for those that don't know Borrow My Doggy, it's, I believe it's a UK app, but it might be worldwide. But basically, it's where people might need someone to help out looking after their dog, or for people that don't have a dog and they want to look after someone else's dog. Yeah, it's just a networking thing in that respect. So I started doing that. So then I started thinking, well, I'm good with dogs and I want to understand them more. So then I started studying, learning more about them. And that's when I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And this seems like a natural progression because it really is transferable skills. It's looking at the entire dog, looking at their background, their home life, how their day started, all of that, speaking to the parents, the dog guardians, just seeing their entire life, making a plan of targets that are going to actually have a direct impact on their life and then coaching them through that. That's what I did in teaching. So that's what I do in this work as well.
I was looking at your qualifications
Mhm.
because, as both of us know, the dog industry is not regulated.
Mm-mm.
I looked at it and I thought, oh, very cool. 2025 Dog Trainer of the Year. And then I started seeing a whole bunch of like letters. And I thought, when is the industry going to catch up so that regular dog guardians can understand what these things mean? Because I have no clue. I've got MAPDT UK, ABTC registered, APDT UK accredited.
So these are the accrediting bodies such as the APDT, which is the Association of Pet Dog Trainers in the UK. And then there's other ones such as PACT, IMDT, lots of other ones. But basically, all these organizations are they have a set of standards that people have to meet in order to get accredited by them. So I didn't do my studying with them. I did my studying elsewhere, but then I decided I want to join an accrediting body because it helps you in a professional setting to be part of that organization because people see that organization, at least in the professional world, and it's trusted. So it's kind of like the gold standard. So I joined the APDT and I had to do like a series of essays and I had to do practical assessment as well in front of them and with some people with their dogs. I had to work with their dogs in front of them. And then they accepted me into their organization. And then every year I have to submit a spreadsheet showing how much studying I've done that year, courses, reading, etc. The conditions under the APDT is that your education is up to date and that you're using modern evidence-based methods, that you're not using any old-fashioned harmful techniques such as using prong collars, such as using electric shock collars, bark collars, citronella collars, slip leads, things like that. Because research, science, peer-reviewed studies have shown that those methods cause harm. They might stop a behavior in the short term, but in the long term, they do more harm and they don't look at the underlying causes of what's going on and they don't help a dog to feel safe and confident. It's not a legal requirement that anybody has to belong to any accrediting body. It's not a legal requirement that anyone has to have any education at all to work with dogs, which is why you're never more than 5 meters away from a dog trainer. They're everywhere. And so many of them are really harmful. And, they'll make videos and they'll impress everyone with their videos by showing, look at this dog. This dog was really stressed out, like Cesar Millan on his TV show. Lots of videos of the dog being really, really aggressive, which wouldn't be happening if the dog was in an environment where they felt comfortable and safe. And then it cuts to, a few yanks on the lead and that behavior has stopped, which it probably has because the dog is terrified in that moment. But whatever is causing that behavior, that has to come out somewhere. So it might not come out that way, but it will come out some other way. Or it might stop coming out that way, but give it 6 months, it'll be back and it'll be back with a vengeance. Only this time your relationship is so ruined because of what you've been doing to the dog as a result of listening to what is called balance trainer.
So I remember when I first started my podcast, I actually didn't have much of an understanding between force free and balance. The word balance to me was a word, balance. I didn't really understand any of it. Pardon?
Sounds holistic.
Yes. Yeah, that's so true. since then, I've been speaking to people. I mean, I've even had a balance trainer on my podcast and had a really interesting conversation with him. But even since then, months and months have passed. And obviously, every conversation, my reading, research, I learn a little bit more. And what I tend to question is the conviction that people have, often not with a lot of training, but certainly with a lot of conviction and confident enough to question the science, peer-reviewed science. And I find that astonishing.
Mm.
And what goes on in the dog industry, because a lot of it's identity related. So how do you process that as a trainer? Because what you see is really harmful, and I'm very sure that you will be dealing with the outfall of some of the methods that cause quite a lot of damage anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I see that all the time. I work with clients all the time, and often I'll be like the second or third person they've gone to, and I'll kind of like go through what they've been told to do, and it's horrific often. I think once I explain the reasons behind the behavior and also liken it to how their emotional world might work, I think that's when there's a penny drop moment. So, for example, I was talking to a client the other day who had been told to use a water spray on their dog when their dog was exhibiting aggression towards her partner. She'd been told when something happened or when he barked to spray him with water. And I said, okay. And I said, okay, so instead I want to use food in this situation. She said, well, isn't that rewarding this behavior? And I said, no. I said, I want you to think about something that you're frightened of or something that makes you feel worried or uncomfortable. She said, needles. I said, okay, brilliant. I want you to imagine someone walking towards you with a needle and they're not setting you up for success. They're not helping you to feel comfortable with this. They're just coming towards with this needle saying you need to have this. And then you scream. Imagine then someone then sprayed you in the face with water. And she was like, okay, that makes sense. I said, okay, so now I want you to imagine that someone needs to use a needle with you. But this time they give you a massage. They tell you you're safe. They help you to feel comfortable. They maybe give you a glass of wine. Maybe they'll spend a few weeks just showing you the needle, bringing it over to you, letting you be near it, touching it near your arm, but it not hurting you until over time you can cope with it. That would be better, right? That's setting them up for success. And also we've got some positive reinforcement going on there. I said, imagine if every time I brought that needle close to you, I gave you 500 quid. I bet over time you'd soon learn to be able to cope with it being a little bit closer to you. She said, yeah, I would. I was like, you see, so it's a similar thing. In that situation, this dog is feeling a lot of pressure from, I think, pain. I think this dog is in pain, and that's how this behavior is manifesting. Because dogs that are in pain feel very out of control with what's going on inside. So they try to control everything that's happening outside because they're just very, very stressed and over threshold dealing with chronic pain. So I said, but if this dog is feeling pressure, what they need is space, distance, calm, kindness, and a sweetener to help them feel better about things, not more pressure. They're already feeling pressure. You can't fight pressure with more pressure because then that's when things explode, which is what's happening and why this dog is now biting, because the more subtle stress signals were being dismissed, and not only dismissed, they were being punished. So it's the same sort of thing. So yeah, I think once people understand it from a point of view where they can put themselves in their shoes, it makes more sense to them. And when people understand you can't punish away pain, you can't punish away fear.
What would you say to people who would say, okay, but that is anthropomorphizing? Because a lot of people who go the balanced route see it as a labor of love. They would quite happily tell you that they love their dogs and be offended that you would even remotely insinuate that they wouldn't. So people are coming at it from, I feel like it's the system, it's not the individuals, it's the belief system, you know what I mean? And the identity that's attached to that. What I'm interested in is the need to control. Where do you think that came from? Because not only is that obviously trainers, but it's also dog guardians, or just humans in general. Where do you think our need to control came from, and why does it persist despite the evidence, the science?
I think one reason is that people don't understand how to use positive reinforcement correctly. They think that it is just throwing food at a dog. There's a lot more nuance to it than that. There's a lot more when I go to someone's house and I work with their dog, there's a lot more that we do than me just throwing food. So there's, first of all, there's the application of it and understanding about a dog's emotional well-being and all of the other factors, looking at so many other factors, gut health, physical pain, etc., trigger stacking. If they're not got those things in place, then nothing can be achieved. And quite often people don't get those other factors correct and they just try to use positive reinforcement with a dog. For example, they've got a dog that's very aggressive towards other dogs out on the street. They're very reactive. They take them out. They try to give them food. Dog won't accept the food. Doesn't work.
Because they're aroused, yeah.
They're over aroused. They're not in any situation there to be accepting food. There is a whole lot more that needs to be done before you even get to that point. There's loads of work that needs to be done. So, but that's where you get a professional in that does understand that. But then you've also got people that, I don't know, man, I think there's mindset. Some people have a more of a generous mindset. And I think some people view anything as, I want to understand this, I want to help this. And other people view things as, I want to control this and I want to shut it down. And I don't know why or what the reason is behind that. But I do think that sometimes some people, there are some professionals working in this industry, some balance trainers, that I don't think will ever get it because they don't see the world. They just see the world as either conforming to them or not. Now, they might believe that they love the dog, but I believe they love the dog when the dog is submitting to them. They love a dog that is obedient and that is an extension of their ego and all of that. But a dog that isn't doing that, a dog that isn't behaving in inverted commas, needs to be broken down to be rebuilt in the way that they find acceptable, which they love and they adore. Yeah, I don't understand it. It's difficult because I don't think that way about anyone or anyone, human or otherwise. I think when there's trauma happening in someone's life, you either go one way to kind of understand it and to be better than the person before, or you double down on that and you go that way. And I think that's what a lot of people have done. But I don't know. This is a bit of armchair psychology. I really don't know.
It's good to ask the question because the thing is, I think I like to believe that even the people that I disagree with, and I know that you're also very vocal and outspoken online. I think that's something that we potentially share. But I like to find some humanity in other people because we all think we're doing the right thing. They think we're doing the wrong thing. We think they're doing the wrong thing. Everyone's talking past each other. So, and at the end of the day, it's the dogs that suffer, right? So I think my most recent realization is that it might be fear-based because what you don't understand is scary. And so in order to make it less scary, you need to control that thing.
Absolutely. Yes, totally. There's a lot of ego, a lot of fear. If you don't understand something, you need to control it, shut it down. Also, like the ability to be able to say to somebody, I don't know, when things aren't working out, I don't know, but let me pass you on to somebody else that might be able to help you with this. I think that's a fundamental characteristic. And you see that in teaching as well. Teachers, where kids will ask them something and the teacher will kind of be like, oh, shit, I don't know the answer to this. Well, this is, and they'll just bullshit some answer. But my favorite teachers have always been the ones that go, I don't know. Do you know that one? Well, let's find out. And I think that comes down to strength of character and I don't know, just being more secure in yourself. And I do think that a lot of these people that do these horrific things to dogs, maybe on a subconscious level, lack feelings of security, which is why they've chosen to control dogs in the way that they do. Because it's one thing to not understand how to do something. Like when I look back at how we treated our dogs in the 80s, we were doing the very best we could with the knowledge we had. But once someone's explained to you and shown you and told you to then not act on that, I think is a choice. And that's where my compassion has limits. Endless compassion for dog guardians that are doing their best with the knowledge they have, endless. But for people that are being given information, they're just shutting it down. I think sometimes from people with, PhDs and the like, and they're still not willing to hear it because they watched a Cesar Millan YouTube video and, they know everything. And also because they're seeing the results. They think they're seeing the results because they do these horrible things to the dog. They yank them and they shock them and all of that. And the behavior stops. They think it's working. And then people give them lots of money and say, my God, you're amazing. You saved my life. And so they feel really good and it becomes addictive. But what they're not seeing is what happens down the line. I don't know. I don't know. I don't understand the ones that refuse to learn. That's what I don't get.
What I've also noticed is that it's a community-based thing. So the
Mm.
community reinforce. I mean, I've I experimented last week. I actually made a comment under a balance trainer's post. They were teaching people how to use prong collars, guardians, regular people, and I said, knowing what the rebuttal was going to be, I said, if you wouldn't put it around a child's neck, don't put it around a dog's neck. And the first thing I got back was, dogs are not children. I was like, come on, this is not what I'm talking about.
What I would want to ask them is then what's the difference? Actually, what the difference is you're right, because dogs have actually got thinner skin on their neck than a child.
I should never have gone on to someone else's page who already has their community, who buys into what they believe, and say, excuse me, I don't think this is right. There was a pylon. And the
Well,
funny thing is I just said what I said and I left it at that, you know?
you know what? What you've done there is like you've just challenged the foundations of what they believe. That's all. And for some people, it takes a few little minor challenges that kind of chip away at what they've come to believe until eventually they're like, yeah, no, I don't buy this crap anymore. And they come round. So it's not a waste of time just asking these questions and then, disappearing into the night.
Yeah.
It makes one person just kind of have to think. And for them to say, they're not a child. Okay, so in what way? Because yeah, I'm not saying they need to put a school uniform on and they need to go to school and that they need to learn nursery rhymes. No, but they do, like a child, they should be free from pain, from fear. They have an emotional world, and on a cellular level, they're exactly the same as us.
My reference was pain, you know, just because there's fur and you can't actually see the skin doesn't mean there's not pain. Because the argument was like a dog's mum would nip at their neck, the prong collar doesn't actually, it just nips and then releases.
A dog's mum doesn't do that. Actually, a well-adjusted, happy, well cared for dog that has puppies, she doesn't nip at her puppies or anything like that. These people always compare this to when you see a dysregulated mother with her puppies. And actually, a mother that is nipping at her puppies and biting them shouldn't be near them because she is not well.
What would that be signs of, potentially?
Would be signs that the mother is very stressed. Potentially, she was not a good, she shouldn't have been bred from, because she's already struggling with anxiety, stress, potentially pain. She's in a stressful environment. Perhaps it's a puppy farm environment. Perhaps she's being treated with aversive. So her emotional system is on fire already. And then these puppies have come along and she can't cope with anything. So then she's nipping and biting at her puppies.
Mm. So that's abnormal behavior for a mum
Yeah.
I didn't actually know that. I just thought it was a misunderstanding between wolves, that old logic.
Yeah. No, it's not. They don't even do that. And also what these guys that share this kind of stuff don't even realize is that, even wolves, they believe that, wolves have alphas and all of that. And it's not. They have parents and they nurture and rear their kids, and all their offspring help to rear the kids. And it's all done through love, safety, and just well-being. Everyone is looked after. There's no one yanking on their neck. But also, if we were to go down their kind of road in terms of logic, a mother wouldn't be nipping at her dogs for behaviors that are normal, such as if they were walking faster than a human, which is normal for a dog to do because they naturally walk faster than us. So why would that be a normal behavior to be pronging them at that point? Or if they were in a situation that was very stressful and they were lunging and barking at somebody, again, in the dog world, totally normal behavior for that context. So why would that be happening? It wouldn't be happening. So it's so flawed, but they always think that this is, and they think this is science that they're sharing. It's not, but it sounds compelling because intelligent people like you will hear that and you don't see there's anything wrong with it, because why would you? With the idea about what the mother does, I mean. And this is what I mean. I have met and I've worked with so many very intelligent people who've been told crap by uneducated professionals, but they've done it in such a way that is confident, that sounds right. It sounds plausible, you
Yeah.
know, it
Yeah.
sounds,
Really compelling. I
yeah.
I think it was a few weeks ago actually. It was again with again, do you know, I think like you said in the beginning where you create content to respond to as an outlet. I guess
Mm,
like creative out like,
yeah,
like the pressure cooker, like just get rid
totally.
of some of
Right,
that
right,
steam.
right.
I comment not to be combative with the people who post it. I comment so that someone who's on the edge, someone on the fence will see and think, oh, okay, here's maybe another nudge. So there was a really, really famous dog trainer a couple of weeks ago, and he made a whole YouTube video that challenged one of my previous guests who I had on the podcast about the whole like force free. And their argument was very, very strongly around they are the ones saving dogs from being euthanized. They are the ones who are saving people's lives, all these things. And what I realized was this particular person has a lot of experience with the most extreme aggression cases, right? And because they're so vocal and they create the amount of content that they do, I feel like what's missing is that it's almost like they're generalizing without realizing it because their frame of reference is the absolute most extreme cases. But the regular dog guardian, me, hearing that, hears this applies to all dogs.
But you know what? It doesn't even apply to the dogs they're talking about because the dogs that are exhibiting the worst, most extreme behaviors are probably suffering the most. They need the most care. They're probably living with incredible pain. 80% of behavior cases with dogs are linked to pain. So these dogs that are exhibiting maladaptive behaviors, real aggression, all this kinds of stuff, if they are living in such distress, either through pain or something neurological or something like that going on, gut health, and professionals, veterinary behaviorists, ethical trainers, all these people have been involved, and this dog is still not able to live a life of any quality at all, it's very rare that behavioral euthanasia happens at that point. But if it does, it's a liberation for that dog. These people think that by using these horrific tools on these dogs, that they are freeing them. They are, imagine living with the most intense pain. It could be like they have nerve pain. They could have something going on with their spine, which is making them absolutely just, insane with their behavior. And it's not ever been identified. These people are not saving them. They are subjecting more pain on them and they are stopping the behavior by frightening them and shutting it down. So these dogs have gone from one form of hell to an even more extreme world of hell. So they're not saving people. The other thing is a lot of dogs are ending up being surrendered to shelters because they followed this advice and the dogs become aggressive and they end up being out of control because they're so dysregulated on an emotional level. So they end up in shelters. So what these people don't realize is they are the reason that so many dogs are being surrendered and being euthanized in shelters because they've got no room for them because people are abusing them in the name of dog training. Someone had a French bulldog that had neurological problems and was light chasing, obsessively light chasing, was really unwell. And this particular trainer thought, well, I know what to do with this. I'll slip a shock collar on this dog and then I'll use a laser pen. Every time the dog goes after the light, I'll zap it with a shock collar and obviously mess the dog up even more because this is a legitimate problem that requires really specialized care and professionals. So yeah, there's the worse the behavior, the more this dog needs help, the more investigations that need to happen, the more likely it is that this dog is living with pain, with poor gut health. Gut health causes so much issue in dogs. Over arousal, aggression, pain, it's nuts.
God, it's so sad when you think about it that way, right?
It's so sad. So
Just
sad,
the absolute desperation to be heard, to be seen, to be understood, and being met with a very human, fear response.
right? I can only imagine, like, imagine living with pain every single minute of every day, 24/7.
I don't have to. I know what that feels like. Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
imagine you can't tell anyone that, but then imagine that somebody is slapping a collar on you, making you go on a walk every day. And if you try to do anything but what they want you to do, they give you a lead correction. Maybe they make you go to a doggy daycare where you're there all day and you have to fend off people running at you. and jumping on you all day for hours. And then you go home. And if you're a bit dysregulated because you've been fending off dogs all day, you might snap. So then they put a prong collar on you, or they zap you with a shock collar, or they stick you in a crate and bang on it if you whimper. This is the kind of existence that lots of these dogs live with. And it goes on every day. And then they end up living in a state of learned helplessness where they know that nothing is going to stop this. So they just give up and they just become withdrawn, very pessimistic. There's peer reviewed studies that show that dogs that are trained using punishment become very pessimistic and just expect punishment. They expect pain. They expect nothing good to happen. And they become just real like a shell of a dog. And if that's saving a dog, it's not. Yeah.
I'm so fascinated by this conversation. Why do people come to you as a dog trainer?
So it can be all kinds of things. So often people come to me, my dog is very reactive to dogs on the street, or my dog is resource guarding things at home, or my dog won't stop barking, or my dog has bitten someone. Those are the sorts of things that I deal with a lot of the time.
What are some of the major differences that you see from your training to becoming an actual trainer and dealing with people who have lots of challenges with their own dogs?
I think the fundamental difference is understanding how much pain impacts behavior. I think that is includes gut health. I think that is something that is so important and so misunderstood. It's the number one thing that I talk about with clients. It's the first thing that pops into my head when certain behaviors are described. I'll be, yeah, that's pain. Just little light bulbs will be going off in my head when I hear certain behaviors that I just now recognize as classic. That's a pain behavior, which someone else may have put down to, for example, humping. When dogs hump, sometimes they hump because they are overexcited, over aroused. Sometimes they hump because of, they're feeling a bit randy. Sometimes they hump because it feels nice. But sometimes they hump because of pain, and that is how they are trying to self-soothe the pain. But you'll often see people often thinking that it's, they're just trying to shag everyone, or that it's the old-fashioned idea is that they're trying to dominate another dog. It's like, no, they're just, whatever reason, they're not coping in this moment. So we need to help them to feel a bit more calm or a little bit safer, or we need to help them calm down, or we need to find out, is this happening every day, an hour after dinner? That's telling us something. If they're humping their bed every night after dinner, could it be the food? Sorry, Norma's doing her little thing with me.
She's summoning you.
She doesn't even look over at me. She just lays there. Come to me, human.
Okay, so first thing that comes to mind, just say it, right? What is the best book that you have read that changed how you think about dogs more broadly?
One of the earliest books that I ever read, which kind of started me on the right. This is only quickfire, isn't it? In Defense of Dogs by, I think, John Bradshaw. It's years ago, so I'd like to revisit and see if I still agree with everything. But yeah, it's a good starting point.
Okay. Isn't that lovely when you're able to go back and be like, oh, okay, this is very different from what I believed way back when. What is a podcast about dogs that you love and would recommend, and your own is welcome too?
I was going to say, Are You There, Dog? It's Me, Kerry, is my podcast. I recommend listening to that, and especially listen to my episode, Dog Training from Hell, because there is a fantastic interview with one of my clients where she talks about the previous trainers she had worked with and how awful it was, and the journey, and how they conned her into doing awful things to her dog. And she was a very intelligent, very kind woman. It's really interesting from a psychological point of view.
Quick sidestep. How do you console? How do you create an environment that is void of judgment? Because I'm sure there's a lot of shame and a lot of guilt attached to people who have mistreated their dogs in the name of doing what they thought was right, because a trainer who they potentially trusted because they're a dog trainer told them to. How do you deal with that?
I think I always make it very clear that it's not their fault. These people reach out to people in their most vulnerable hour of need, and they want help. And these people promise them everything, and they tell them that everything they're doing is good for the dog. So they believe it. And they also manipulate, tell them, if you don't do this, your dog is going to get worse. Your dog is going to bite a child, etc. So I totally understand where they are coming from, and I've got endless compassion for them, because these are people that just need help. and they are exploited by unqualified professionals in this industry. Yeah.
What is something that dogs do better than humans without effort or training?
Accepting people, no matter what they do to them, which is heartbreaking.
What is a question about dogs that you think more people should be asking?
Why is my dog doing that? What is the function of that behavior for the dog? I think if you think of it in terms of what is the function of that, it helps you to try to unpick it more. So a dog that is lunging and barking is trying to create distance, trying to keep people away. Why? What is the function of that behavior? Why do they want people to stay away? Is it because they're frightened? Is it because they're a guarding breed? Is it because they're in pain, etc.? So what is the function of that behavior?
If you had a magic wand that could change one thing about the dog world in one instant, what would it be and why?
End suffering. Yeah, no suffering, no cruelty, no suffering.
Okay. What gives you hope about the future of interspecies living?
God. What gives me hope? Honestly, this is really tough because I spend a lot of time, a lot of my life despairing of it. What gives me hope? I guess I think that lobsters have been recognized as sentient beings and they're going to stop people boiling them alive is a good step forward.
Oh my God, that's dark.
Right? I mean, this is where I'm at.
I know, but this is the thing. I think this probably leads really well into my next question. When you see a lot of abuse, when you see a lot of fallout of poor decision making or, I guess, ignorance, whether that's willful or unknowing, how do you keep your edges soft?
Hmm.
Because it could make a person really bitter and it can make a person really reactive, for
Yeah.
lack of a better word.
Humor. I use humor a lot and I use humor a lot on my social media, interspliced with kind of, I think, hopefully useful educational stuff. There'll also be a lot of kind of ridiculous, silly humor in there as well. And I like to tackle any aggression that I receive from people with humor as well. I like to diffuse situations with humor a lot. Um, I've got a really good peer group as well of professionals that I speak to. I've got good friends that I've met through the industry that I talk to a lot about this stuff. It's, we're all kind of out here working on our own, but we kind of work very, very closely with each other and we'll share things that are going on, talk about things. So it's very much like having like colleagues. So I think that's really important, and having a work phone and a personal phone and just switching the work phone off and being like, no, I'm not gonna look at that. I'm going to rewatch Schitt's Creek and, forget that that all exists. And also crap at my practice at the moment, but Buddhist practice generally in the past has been the most important thing to me because it's helped me to find compassion in so many situations. And when I've seen somebody doing something to a dog that has infuriated me or has made me feel really hopeless or really sad, chanting on that particular thing and trying to draw up compassion and understanding of that situation, and understanding that that person is doing the best that they can in that moment is really helpful for me to do. And also to remember that anger, if it's anger for justice, is okay. But yeah, I think turning poison into medicine, when shit stuff happens, think, how can I draw the learning out of this? Can I get rid of the rest of it? And can I turn this around so there's a positive outcome, even if that means that I'm making a social media post where I'm sharing about it, explaining why we shouldn't do that or what we should do instead, or what my advice is. That then transforms it for me. Yeah. But, I I'm not gonna lie, there are times when I do get completely, I get compassion fatigue, definitely. A very wise Buddhist once told me, though, that when we feel like we have got compassion fatigue, we don't have enough compassion at that point, and we need even more compassion. And I do try to remember that. I'll still be effing and jeffing and, and I might be ranting about it, but later on, I normally reflect on it and I normally kind of come back to a place of, I c
Regulation.
yeah, I understand where this behavior came from. I understand why they were doing that. I'm frustrated with the situation. However, I understand why they did that. What can I do to counter that in the world, make a difference.
I love that. Keep doing what you're doing. So a small question out of that, well, small question, but quite a deep one actually. You've got the knowledge of knowing something is wrong, and you've also got this internal driver or potentially a wound that is activated when you witness injustice, right? Because if it's anything for you like it is for me, it's visceral. Like I actually physically feel injustice. So if it's not too personal to ask, what is that thing for you? How have you experienced injustice in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about this quite openly, I think, on my social media. So I was bullied as a kid because I've got nerve damage on my face, congenital nerve damage on my face, which means that my face isn't very symmetrical. And I've had people say all kinds of horrible things to me, give me horrible nicknames growing up. Teachers say horrible things to me, grown adults say horrible things to me. What's wrong with your face? That sort of thing, which led me to feel awful about myself in terms of my value as a human and kind of just wanting to turn me into like an invisible person, really hide myself. And it really impacted me to the point of, I started developing panic attacks in my early 20s. It's impacted every aspect of my life, this bullying. So I guess I really just have no tolerance for bullies. I understand where it comes from. I understand that bullies bully, because they feel terrible themselves, or they're just, in some cases they are just sadistic people. But I think more than likely they, hurt people, that kind of thing. But as a result, nobody really stood up for me, or I had to do it all for myself. And I guess in that way, I want to be the person standing up for the dogs when people are bullying those. And I think as well, I feel like doing this work has been really transformative for me. I never used to let anyone take my photo. I would never let anyone film me. Now I talk to camera all the time because I think if anyone says anything to me, that is a huge red flag about that person. Anyone that kind of goes online and says, "Whoa, what's wrong with your face?" I think, really? We're still doing that? It's 2026. And I feel really confident in doing that now. And it's been a real journey. And it's actually been my Buddhist practice that got me to that. Doing this, I would never would have done this 10 years ago. An interview with somebody where there's a video, no way. I won't watch it back. Don't get me wrong. I still don't like watching myself and I won't watch it back. But I don't care that it's out there now. So yeah, a lot of it comes from that feeling of fighting for people that no one else is fighting for. Because I know what it feels like to feel rubbish.
Yeah. But I think it's incredible that you got there. And I'm sorry that that's what it took for you to get there.
Thank you. I think for me, the more that I started doing it, the more that I started doing this like video kind of thing and putting it out there, the more that I learned, this is safe. I can do it. And the more I began to pity people that did make comments, and the more I'm now just ready to kind of, really just let them know what I think of them if they say anything. So I think, don't get me wrong, I'm riddled with insecurities, absolutely riddled. But there are some areas of my life, in fact, it's always been in my professional life that I've always been most confident. Personal life, not anywhere near as confident. But in my professional life, I really believe in what I'm doing, and I'll stand by what I'm doing. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, Kerry, you have been phenomenal, a wonderful guest. Thank you so much for joining me.
Likewise.